We created you. We created your culture, your music.
What culture did you create?
We create the songs you were singing on the ship to Africa, the song you were singing on the fields. Everything came from Africa.
My mission is to build a bridge that can't be broken, a bridge that should have always been there. Do you know what I mean?
The message from Burna, I believe, would be that every black person should please remember that you were Africans before you became anything else.
The U.S. ain't got no culture. You know, the Latino and the West Indian has the greatest influence, and we've always had, and we always will.
A lie that is unchecked becomes the truth.
Told me, you know why African people look down on black people? I said, why? He said, because y'all are ignorant. Y'all don't know who y'all really are.
My first question is, why don't they just go back home?
Where?
Back to Africa.
We created you.
A lie.
We created your culture.
My first question is, why don't they just go back home?
Everything came from Africa.
Back to
Before
Africa.
you became anything
We
else.
created you.
Who is Africa? Some of you may be saying, don't you mean what is Africa or where is Africa? No, I specifically want to know who is Africa. As anyone with a map can learn where Africa is, but not the who. And the question who happens to be in reference to a reoccurring narrative which posits that all creations that come by way of a black mind must have the credit for its creation forfeited in some capacity to Africa. What you've just heard are the unique names of Hadzabe tribesmen in Tanzania. And the name of this tribesman can only mean one thing. Nelly should have given credit to Africa. And this is at the core of an argument that was made by a caller who took issue with documentary filmmaker Tariq Nasheed's commentary surrounding the creation of hip-hop.
Man, you got some African dudes now trying to claim we got it from them.
Microphone Check, the documentary film authored by Tariq Nasheed, sought to clear the air pertaining to what has been considered misgivings that hip-hop was created cross-culturally as well as cross-racially.
Today, people want to downplay the Latino role in hip-hop. Hip-hop would not have existed without specifically Puerto Rican.
Despite a myriad of ethnicities and races who participate in hip-hop currently, Tariq Nasheed lays the case that all 5 tenets of hip-hop were the creations of foundational black Americans, which is a narrative that has not sat well with many Puerto Ricans as well as Jamaicans.
A lot of people that's not even from New York, that's not even from the Bronx, when I'm talking about the Puerto Ricans, had nothing to do with the start of hip hop. Are you crazy?
But now, Africa enters the chat. Or, at the very least, someone who has crowned themselves an agent of Africa's Cultural Collections Bureau has come to collect their share of the credit.
You lie about the hip hop and all this.
Okay, what did I lie about?
You say you don't even mention Africa in your documentary.
Right. What do you have to do with the creation of hip hop? Explain that.
Okay, I want to say, hip hop is a black thing. It's black. Okay.
It's foundational Black American creed.
No. It's not. You say FBA. This is FBA. This is FBA because you make up stuff because you want to. You are like a Nazi to black people.
On the surface, it would be like, hey, everybody here that's black gets treated a certain way. Why are you making that delineation?
That is an excellent point.
Do you remember the hashtag #BringBackOurGirls? It was created in response to the kidnappings done by Boko Haram, which has been identified as a terrorist group out of Nigeria in Africa. But why aren't more Africans clamoring to take credit for the acts of Boko Haram? After all, they're black and they're also African. So shouldn't the caller be charged with the crimes of Boko Haram by pigmentation proxy? Unless, of course, credit has absolutely nothing to do with color.
It's not color, it's culture. Steven Spielberg did Schindler's List. Martin Scorsese did Goodfellas. Steven Spielberg could direct Goodfellas. Martin Scorsese probably could have done a good job with Schindler's List. But there are cultural differences. I know, you know, we all know what it is when a hot comb hits your hair on a Sunday morning.
Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
What it smells like.
Bacon! Bacon! Where's the bacon? I smell bacon!
That's a cultural difference, not just a color difference. So it's the culture.
When the conversation is devoid of ulterior motives, the concept of culture appears to be understood without contestation. And despite the caller's attempts to speak on the behalf of all of Africa, there are Africans whose sentiment debunks his argument altogether. Music artist Akon, who has made his share of controversial remarks as well, believes that there is a difference.
What do you consider yourself today? Are you American? Are you African? Are you African American? What are you?
I'm an African raised in America. You know, clearly.
So you're not American?
I wish I was, but my mind is not African. I mean American. It's clearly African. Like, one thing I do notice about America is that they respect other cultures. They actually admire other cultures very much. So when they can see the difference in who you are, their attitude towards you is completely different as well too. But if you're walking into me and I know you're a foreigner, but you're acting like an American, you just seem fake.
So it is clear that the caller speaks for himself, despite his efforts to paint an entire continent with the brush of his self-centered sentiment. And just when you thought that it couldn't get any worse than that, the caller doubled down as he alludes to the notion that African ancestry disqualifies a so-called Black American from ever taking credit for the creation of anything.
What did y'all create?
We created you. We created you. We created your culture, your music.
What culture did you create?
We create the songs you were singing on the ship to Africa, the song you were singing on the fields. Everything came from Africa.
It was this statement which prompted the initial inquiry. Who is Africa?
We created you.
Who is we? See, statements like these reek of a superiority complex that serves as a perfect impediment to any attempt of cross-cultural unity. His statements are oddly reminiscent of the dynamics between our enslaved ancestors and those who bestowed upon themselves the title of slave master, whereby all creative efforts of the slave became the intellectual property of the slave master.
Mine, all of mine. And what's mine is mine. And nobody...
But if the argument is that so-called Black America must credit all cultural accomplishments to an African ancestor,
Okay!
Let's begin with Richard Dawkins, who is an evolutionary biologist and zoologist. And also, because he was born in Nairobi, Kenya, he is African. Although clearly he is what most would classify as white boy. Now in this video, Richard Dawkins is wearing a shirt that states, "We are all Africans," a message that sparked curiosity, which gave him cause to explain.
Could you please explain why we are all Africans?
Mine, all of mine. And what's mine is mine.
That is 6 million years ago. And that is the common ancestor of chimpanzees and bonobos and humans. That is about 7 million years ago, and that is the common ancestor of all those and gorillas. That's about 12 million years ago, and that's the common ancestor of all those and orangutans. Orangutans, as you know, are Asian apes. Gorillas, humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees are African apes. Darwin conjectured, long before there were any available fossils, that the right place to look for human fossils was Africa, and he worked that out by pointing out that humans most resemble the other African apes, namely chimpanzees, well, they didn't call them bonobos in those days, and gorillas. The reason that we know approximately the date of the common ancestor is molecular evidence comparing the genes, comparing the proteins of these various animals. It's possible to calibrate the date at which a common ancestor happened, and we can date the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees and bonobos at about 6 million years ago.
So if all of Black American culture is to be credited to Africa, then according to Richard Dawkins, all of African culture is to be credited to the genetic grandfather of an orangutan. Now, if you're offended, it's too bad. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't dictate to foundational Black Americans or any other culture of people how far back they are allowed to go in history to give ancestral credit. Because if the argument is that what an African was doing 500 years ago is the reason for why hip-hop was created in America, then the genetic grandfather of an orangutan should be credited with everything that Africa holds dear. If it is African DNA that entitles this caller to claim credit for himself, considering that the consensus of scientists declare that all of humankind have African ancestry, then that suggests that the creations and machinations of all men should be credited to Africa. Take a look at this clip from the movie The 13th Warrior. In this movie, this particular character is Muslim. Now listen to how he identifies himself.
I am Ahmed ibn Fahlan, ibn al-Abbas, ibn Rashid, ibn means son of.
Why didn't he keep naming names all the way back to the grandfather of an orangutan? Is this disrespectful to the ancestors? No. But first of all, we have to remember what an ancestor is. It's not just someone who died a long time ago. An ancestor is someone that you personally have descended from. And the way that we honor and connect with an ancestor begins with calling the ancestor by name. There have been those who, because of the detailed records that were kept during slavery, have been afforded the ability to call the very names of their ancestors as far back as over 300 years. Imagine, for those who have spiritual beliefs rooted in the idea that you can call upon your ancestors for help, can you imagine how much help that a person with 300 years worth of the names of his ancestors can call on, versus someone who has yet to learn the name of their own father? How many outside of a royal bloodline can do the same? So if there are no names of people through whom we have directly descended being offered up, there is no honoring of an ancestor. And perhaps it's not the caller's intentions, but to many Black Americans, the approach that the caller took communicates as a greedy grab for glory. But I get it. You want everyone to acknowledge Africa. You want everyone to remember Africa. You want credit to go to Africa. But Africa is not an ancestor. It is the name that had been given to the land where our ancestors dwelt, and also the land where they were betrayed. It is the place that produced Boko Haram, but it is also the place that produced Nelson Mandela. But the land is not the ancestor. And if you were to call upon an African ancestor while visiting the United States, would the ancestor have to catch a plane from overseas in Africa to come to your rescue? If not, then that suggests that the ancestors to whom we call by name are not defined by nor confined to the land where they were laid to rest. Instead, they are with us. They are a part of us.
Blackness is more than just color. It is their heritage, it's their history, it's their code of conduct, and more importantly, it is their badge of honor, and it's what it symbolizes the indebtedness that this country has to them. This country does not have an indebtedness to people coming from Africa. They only have an indebtedness to people coming in from the Bahamas. If you lump black folk in there, you deprive black folk of the benefit, the debt that's owed them. Don't do that.
I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave.